This is Acts of Faith. Every day, World Team works to transform communities, make disciples, and reach the unreached. Our unique teams innovate, multiply, and expand the reach of the gospel. Our vision and aim? To make Jesus known. Together, we share the hope of the gospel on a global scale by meeting the needs of communities. These are our acts of faith.
In this episode of Acts of Faith, World Team workers Brian and Heather sit down with Jeff and Robin to discuss the concept of failure and its role in their lives as missionaries. They share their thoughts on how God uses failure to shape and mold their lives, as well as the importance of community when confronting and persevering through failure.
Thank you all for joining us for the first session of Persevering Through Failure. In these sessions, we're hoping that you will find encouragement and guidance as we prepare for and work through whatever failure is at the moment. My name is Brian Flood, and I am joined with my colleagues. And if I could get you guys to introduce yourselves.
I'm Jeff Owens.
And Robin Owens.
And we have been with World Team for 20 years, serving in Moldova. I'm currently the field director there.
I'm Heather Flood, wife of Brian Flood. And we've been with World Team since 2017 and currently are the directors of the International Neighborhood Network, ministering to diaspora in the United States.
So in our first session, what we want to do is we want to introduce this idea of why are we even talking about this? And as we were preparing, the things that we thought of was, first, let's define some terms. So failure. What is failure? And Merriam-Webster, the simplest definition of failure is a lack of success. Now, that's a little bit too simple for us right here. I don't think it goes all the way into it. But one of the things that I came across was this idea that failure is relative to something. There has to be a standard that we look at. It's not just, there isn't a universal idea of, well, I am a failure, or this failed structurally, or something along those lines. There's this idea that there is a standard that something succeeds, and there's a standard at which something fails. As we talk through this, each session, we're going to look at different areas of this. So in session 2, Heather's going to introduce the theology of failure, looking at the biblical references to it. What does God say about failure? What are the examples that he gave us in the Bible? In session 3, Jeff is going to talk about the practical steps for dealing with missed expectations. And I think that is really one of those things that we land on. What is that measure? What did we fail relative to? Now that that's happened, then in session 4, Robin is going to talk about what we do going past failure. I'm going to read through a couple of the definitions of failure. A omission of occurrence of performance, specifically failing to perform a duty or expected action. There's the internal measure, right? A state of inability to perform a normal function, such as kidney failure or heart failure. So there's this idea that there can be external sources. We talked about this today on our way to coffee. Heather and mine, we had our truck alternator failed last night as we were dropping you off, and we coasted into a parking spot as the lights dimmed to nothingness. That is a failure. Well, Could I have bought a nicer car? Yes, maybe that would have done that. But that failure happened not because I wanted it to, or not because I did something inherently wrong. It's because we live in a fallen world and things break, things fail. Then there's this idea of fracturing, or a giving way under stress, as in structural failure. Sometimes I think that's a good image of an emotional failure for us sometimes. Like, the stress happens. If you're watching this, you are probably a worker. You are probably a worker with World Team. There is processes, and you will feel this, right? That's the part that we get to in the end. And then, of course, the very famous definition of failure as a lack of success. So when we think about failure elementally, is there anything you guys think of immediately?
My first thought when I think about failure is, what did I do wrong? I think that's how Satan attacks us in our Christian walk, is he wants to blame or make us feel that we didn't perform to expectations.
Too many times I think it's the missed goal. We spend lots of time thinking about the end result, the goals, and then we don't accomplish it. Something gets in the way or trips us up, and it just doesn't happen.
For me, when I think of failure, or I've experienced failure, usually my first thought is, or eventual thought is, I'm not enough. And taking that on personally, but then also like, oh, I'm not enough for my team, or I'm not enough for God, or it's like, and if it, then why am I even doing this?
I was struck by just the term you use, structural failure. And part of it that we all realize going to the field is we need to be equipped. Our foundation must be firm in Christ. But that in itself will not prevent failure. Failure is a tool that God uses to shape and mold us. The whole purpose of the Old Testament is to show us what happens in our lives when we do fail. When Israel was dependent and following God, there was blessing and success. But that doesn't always mean that just because we do things right, we're not going to fail. And I think that's something in the West that we tend to think that if I read my Bible every day, if I pray every day, if I do all these structural things right, then I'm going to be happy, wealthy, and ministry's just going to flourish. Despite. So there is this component that we need to be structurally sound in our relationship with Christ, but understand that failure is a tool that God can use to shape and mold us.
Why prepare for failure? Shouldn't we be preparing for success? I think we said there are self-help books with that title out there, Preparing for Success. And here we are saying, hey, lucky you. Well, you get to prepare for failure. So why do that? Why prepare for failure? I mean, is it just because it's an eventuality?
Sometimes. I remember going to camps and I had a bag, and everybody knew Robin had a bag, and it had safety pins and tape and screwdrivers and batteries. And if you could need it and you're in the middle of nowhere and you can't get it, it was in the bag. And so sometimes you do prepare. You prepare for the baby, the diaper bag. You prepare for the road trip. Well, sometimes we have to step over a rock or splash in the mud to keep moving. You stay on the path. And then there are times that the road is blocked.
Most missionaries that go to the field are very self-motivated, self-starters, and we feel like God is going to use us to literally change the world. But most of us never consider the fact that failure is inevitable. Christ is the only one that did not fail. and being prepared for the inevitability, I think, is just part of the training that we need to accept.
Humility is a hard trait to just say, I'm going to get it. I want it. But you can learn, you really can learn. And then we're usable and moldable for the next task that he has.
I don't know if I'm unique among sent people, but I think there is a certain amount of arrogance, self-assuredness, and certainly complete lack of understanding that in some odd way, God knew I needed in order to do this. Because if I had a true understanding of everything that I would experience, there is no way I would have said yes to this, at least the me who was before I went. And this whole idea of what's next? How do we grow in that? Jeff, you were going to say something.
Well, as you were talking, part of the journey of cross-cultural missions is being dependent on God. Yes. Most of us go into cultures that we don't understand, languages that we're learning, and we need to be stripped down. I think Robin used the word humility, or we need to be humbled so we become dependent on God. You know, one of the things in all of our 20 years on the field, I tell people I am so leery of people who walk in, who plant their flag and said, God sent me from America, Canada, Australia to do this. You know, they've never set foot in country before. They haven't learned the first lesson, and yet they are so assured that this is what they're going to do. And I said, okay, and we probably won't see these people in a year or two. And a lot of times, these are the people that are not teachable. And one of God's greatest teaching tools is failure.
Do you think someone who starts out that way can become teachable?
Absolutely. One old pastor who's in heaven now said that we're like thoroughbred horses. We are raring to get out of the gate. Just get out of our way. We've been equipped. We've been trained. We're ready. And God puts us on harnesses us to a work team. 4 of us or more together. And you can imagine pulling left and right and forward and back and stubbornness and everything that's coming out. Until we learn to work together, you can't plow the row. You can't move forward to have a crop grow. And I think of that all the time. And we love our teammates. We love working with people, but it's the hardest thing. And it's us. We're there, right. You know, that looks like failure sometimes. And people leave the field. People separate. And sometimes it's okay to do that.
You know, I think sometimes we become tempted to leave before we've seen God's purpose in that process. We were talking about this earlier, that Jesus was crucified. It looked like the ultimate failure. Depending on who you were in the crowd, whether you were his disciples who were either had betrayed him or were just dumbfounded. This is not the end of the story that I thought it would be, or you're those who, you know, the Pharisees who were like, yep, you failed, or, you know, or the ones who nailed his hands to the cross. You know, it feels like that's it, that the ultimate failure, but God says, no, I'm on the cusp of victory. And just look up and hold on.
You know, I think you hit on this whole idea of failure. I think for me, what I struggled most when I identified a personal failure was I have ruined it. Mm-hmm. I have stopped what God was going to do. I have squelched the Spirit. Nobody's coming to the Lord, you know, ever again, and the church will never be planted. And I think that that thought, as devastating as it was, truly, and truly, if you're in that place, it's devastating. Your heart is shattered. It is a lie that the enemy tells, and it works because of that same arrogance that somehow I have the power to thwart God's plans in anything, that somehow he's surprised by Brian's
idea.
Right? Oh gosh.
I didn't expect this.
I should have known that the alternator was going to blow. And why didn't I order it, a week ago, so I have time to put it in before I go on my next trip?
Yeah. Or I should have known that's how the team was going to interact. Or I should have known that's how the unreached were going to respond to our efforts. Or I should have known that my partners back home were going to stop supporting me because they are in crisis themselves. Or I should have known that this was going to put a strain on our family, my family back home, or my family that I'm living with here. I should have.
One of the things that most attracted me to World Team, I remember sitting in race, and I remember the visiting missionary over Zoom, and the one that we had in the room at the time, somebody outright invited them to say, tell us what didn't work. And they were like, oh yeah, let me tell you, this didn't work and that didn't work. And oh my goodness, when we did this, and whether it was a plan that went south or a government that changed over while they were in country, or being captured and put in a cage, though our actions can have an effect, God's still not surprised by that. No, it's what happens next. From that moment of apparent failure, what happens next? And I think ultimately the healthiest moments of failure in me was the moment when I was like, this had to happen to get to tomorrow. As we were talking, I had this thought of the 23rd Psalm, right? Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I remember many years ago, somebody went and interviewed a shepherd. Sheep are not smart creatures. They don't know how to take care of themselves. They'll eat until they're so fat that they fall over and they die. They will drink dirty water rather than clean water because it's convenient. The rod and the staff don't come out until something goes wrong. The staff guides when something is going in the wrong direction. The rod comes out in order that a correction can happen and that hopefully you remember the next time, even though it likely isn't going to happen because sheep are not smart. So many people take comfort from that psalm. And I think what we look at it is in a frame of we are going to failure. Failure is going to happen around us. We are going to experience the fear of the valley, right? We're going to experience all of those pieces. We need that direction. And I think we need the failure in order to move forward.
As you were talking about that, it brought to mind something that Heather had mentioned earlier. Is we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are not alone. So if you are going through a time of reflection over failure, don't feel like you can walk this journey alone. One of the things we want to encourage you to do is reach out and have someone walk this journey with you.
There is going to be certain things that brings you to this series, either in preparation for the field or in response to a failure. Don't do it alone. Be with a coach, be with somebody. The four of us here, we are doing this. We're walking through this again together. It's been such a joy. And this idea of you can do this, just you and God, but it's so much better to do it with somebody else, to be in somebody else's presence. And if you have to start by yourself, go back and do this with somebody, a team, a mentor.
it goes back to what Robin said about humility. The enemy wants to isolate us, and it is a very easy lie to believe and justify. It feels safer to do this alone, to truly be able to move past failure and persevere through to the other side of the valley. You have to do it in community.
And Heather, part of that community is being willing, when you've come to the other side, to walk with someone else.
Yes.
And to share with them, you can do this. To encourage them, to share your story so they can see they're not alone. And there's hope, there's joy, and you know that the Lord has been with you.
Amen.
There's one last image that Robin and I have. We had the opportunity out in Colorado one time. We took a Jeep and we thought, oh, we're going to take this picnic and we're going to go up above tree line and look at this beautiful view of the Rocky Mountains. We get up there, it's cold as blue blazes, it's August, there's still snow on the ground, but there's this amazing view, and we all in our Christian walk talk about these mountaintop experiences. But there was something that trip showed us.
Nothing grows on the top.
Nothing grows on the mountaintop.
Oh,
Nothing.
It was when you get back down in the valley that's where the growth occurs. And that has always stuck with us.
To learn more about World Team's ministry opportunities, go to us.worldteam.org and click Go at the top of the page. To see prayer requests from World Team workers, click Pray. To give to World Team's ministries, click Donate.
This has been Acts of Faith, a podcast by World Team US. For more information on World Team and its ministries, visit us.worldteam.org.